Welcome today to Living the Hobby Farm Dream. This is episode 8, and today we're going to be talking about some self-sufficiency skills, starting with sourdough bread, and we'll be doing some more after this in our other episodes about some self-sufficiency things that we've learned on our hobby farm. So we hope you'll join along with us. We ask that you'd please follow our show on Spotify. It really helps when you follow it. And also we post them on our YouTube channel, which is also called Hobby Farm Dream. So if you'll follow those, that'd be great. And that would help us out a whole lot. We really appreciate it. And what really started our sourdough journey started, I think, a long time ago when they used to have something called Amish friendship bread. If any of you have been around for a while, maybe you've heard of that before. When my children were young, we did that in our neighborhood and at our church. And people would give you some Amish bread and some starts. And then you had to feed that every day. And then you would have different bags of it that you could either freeze or give to your friends. And after a while, sometimes you would get tired of doing it and maybe throw it away because you got tired of feeding it. So that was really only my experience with having a feeder like that, something that you had to feed every day. I was online on Etsy, and I found some dehydrated sourdough starter that I could get. So I ordered that. And when I got it, I wasn't really successful with the dehydrated version. I tried it a few times and it just wasn't working for me, and I got a little discouraged. And then I was on Instagram and I found a lady locally here where I live in Arizona that had some live starter and had been successful with sourdough. And so I reached out to her to see if I could go by and pick up some at her house, and she was more than willing to let me come by and pick up some of her sourdough starter, and she showed me how to feed it. And she gave me her recipe, which was a good recipe, and that helped a lot to meet her. And during this time, I had watched an episode on TV about sourdough bread, and that it was an ancient bread and that it had been around forever and ever, that it had antitoxins in it, and that it was the oldest type of leavened bread, that it was from like 3700 before the Common Era, that it had prebiotics, and that it was used throughout the world. And I just found that really, really fascinating. And so I started getting into making sourdough bread. And then also during this time, that was when COVID-19 came along, and it was really hard to find yeast to make bread for our family, or in the stores it was hard to get groceries and bread. And so I started making sourdough to feed my family, and we found that we really, really liked it. It was so versatile. I could store it in the fridge when I wasn't using it. And so that was really fascinating that I could do that, because I didn't know that that was possible. It does take some responsibility to feed it and take care of it, but there's also times when you can put it in the fridge for up to 6 weeks and that you don't have to feed it. In the very beginning of my sourdough journey, honestly, it was still a little discouraging, even with the live sourdough starter that I had in my jar. At first, the first loaves turned out really flat sometimes and ugly. It's like I didn't get the knack to it right away. Sometimes it was really misshapen. It would not turn out the proofing, which is how you leave it until you actually bake it to let it rise. First you're going to let it rise a little bit on the countertop, and then you let it rise in the fridge, and all that helps it proof it so that it will look good when you cook it. And a lot of those things took some time to learn all the ins and outs of doing it. I did take the recipe and changed it a little bit that I got. To me, it was a little bit too salty, and so I ended up putting less salt in, which I felt like made it taste better. Also, I learned how to take the time and the temperature that was on the recipe, and sometimes I would turn it down just a little bit so that it didn't burn as much on the bottom. Then later on, I found out some tricks about putting some rice down in your Dutch oven to keep it from burning on the bottom, and that helped a lot. Also, I watched a million YouTube and Instagram videos, how-tos about sourdough, tried different recipes, different experiments with it, and also learned more about the terminology and the right tools to use, especially with things like scoring. Makes a big difference if you have the right tool. And also, I didn't know you're supposed to change out the blades more often in order to be able to do the scoring right. So some of those little tricks I learned as I practiced. It took probably a year to 2 years in order for me to get where I felt like really confident with doing sourdough. And a lot of it was just trial and error. My family would eat it and they would like it, but each batch would get better. Each time I made it, it seemed like it would get a little better. And then sometimes I would make it 2 or 3 times, and then I'd have it not turn out well. It could be because the house was too cold. The house, I left it to proof too long, either on the counter or in the fridge. So all those things I had to keep learning and learning by practicing. For me, I think the main thing with sourdough and gardening, a lot of things that we've learned here on our farm, it has to do with not giving up and to keep trying, because it does get frustrating sometimes, and you are discouraged when you look online and see some of the videos of people that are able to make their breads, it seems like, look perfect almost overnight. But I would say that most of those people that are really, really good at it have put a lot of time and practice into it. They also started out with a really good sourdough starter. Then they experimented with how long to proof it, the temperature in the oven. They also experimented with different things to do with it. There's something called discard, which is the extra sourdough starter that you have, and then you can make a lot of different things with those. I've made flour tortillas, we've made waffles, pancakes, we've made cakes and cookies. So that's the great thing about sourdough, because it's always there. You don't have to worry about going to the store. It's always on your counter in your fridge. You can pull it out at any time to make any type of thing for your family. To make the sourdough bread, I use about 1/2 cup of the sourdough starter that's bubbly, that has been fed within the last 12 hours. Also, I use 1 3/4 teaspoons of salt. I cut the salt way back. Then I use about 1.5 cups of warm water. It has to be between 110 and 115. I use a thermometer to find out the right temperature for it, because if you get it too hot, it's not good, and if it's not hot enough, it's not good. And then I add between 3 and 4 cups of flour. You can use different kinds of flour. I normally use organic flour. My family prefers the white flour, organic flour. I can usually get that at my local store, and that's what I use inside my recipe. And then we stretch and pull that for about 2 hours every half an hour. Then it sits on my counter overnight for about 7 or 8 hours, and then I put it in the fridge for about 7 hours until it's ready to bake. Sometimes I've done it a little bit less than that, as far as sitting on the counter to proof, and also in the fridge I've done it a few less hours than that, and it still turns out well. Of course, there's sometimes when there's, like I said, there's something in the air or something I didn't do right, as far as the starter or the temperatures or the recipe. But most of the time it's pretty consistent, that I've been doing it now for 6 years, since I very first started making it from the live sourdough starter. I was able to take the sourdough, after I'd learned how to do it well, and start selling it to my neighbors and friends. I've also given it away many times at Christmas time or for their birthdays, holidays, anything like that, and everyone really loves it when they taste it. It tastes really fresh and tastes so different than any sourdough bread that you would buy at the store. A good friend and I also have taught some sourdough classes here in our home, and we normally would charge about $100 to have them come for the evening to learn how to do the basics of sourdough. For their $100, they would get a nice little dinner, serving sourdough bread along with the dinner, and then we would show them the basics of how to make the dough and give them the recipes, some good recipes, the basic sourdough bread recipe, but also some other recipes that they could use. And they've gone away with a lot of knowledge and willing to try, and we've had a lot of people that started doing sourdough from that class. I've also taught the sourdough class through my church women's organization a few times, and that's been good. At our class, in our home and also at our church, we would give away free samples of the sourdough starter. Then they could take it home and they could learn how to feed it and take care of it and try the sourdough recipes. And everyone gets a little discouraged when they first start sourdough, or maybe they're not able to keep up with it, and that's okay, because we let them come back and get some more sourdough starter so that they can try again. And that's the great thing about sourdough, is it's pretty forgiving as far as a starter. As long as it doesn't get too far gone. If you didn't feed it for a really, really long time, then you might kill it. If it starts turning a terrible color and you can't revive it back with adding more flour to it, then you would have to start all over. But most of the time, as long as I've kept it in the fridge and fed it about every 6 weeks or more often, depending on when I'm using it, then it's been fine for all these years. It's very interesting to think about how whoever first started sourdough so many thousands of years ago, if they just left it on the counter, but that's what they did back then, is they used a lot of things like that to make food. And the sourdough starter and bread are really, really good for you. I would say don't be too hard on yourself. Keep trying to get the best loaf that you can and the best recipes you can. Be patient with yourself and don't give up, and keep trying the different types of recipes, especially like this. If you find a good recipe to make the bread, like I said, watch lots of videos. They're very inspiring. Don't think that your bread has to be perfect the first time you do it, or even the first 10 or 20 times that you do it. It will get better. And things like scoring, just keep it very, very basic in the beginning as far as your scoring on the top, and then as you get more experience with what it feels like and what it's supposed to look like, then you can try more difficult scoring of your bread. Like I said, everyone I can think of that I've given the bread to has loved it. They love the crusty outside and the soft, delicious inside, and you'll get the knack of it the more you practice it, and then you'll be able to share this bread and this talent with other people. And when people ask, well, why sourdough bread? I say, well, do you remember COVID when we couldn't get yeast? And so I was always grateful that I had some sourdough starter on my counter and that I could provide bread for my family, fresh bread that was really delicious. And don't forget that the fermentation will improve your digestion. It helps your blood sugar control because it takes longer to digest. It's good for your gut health. It will help people that are a little intolerant to gluten. It tastes good to go along with stews and soups. You can slice it in the next few days and make toast out of it. You can make croutons out of it. There's so many different things that you can make out of it. It does not last as long as store-bought bread that has a lot of preservatives in it, so it won't last as long as other bread from the store, but you can keep it on the counter for a few days and then store it in the fridge in a bag to keep it a little bit longer. I've made lots of things out of the sourdough starter, but my absolute favorite thing to make with it is just the sourdough bread. To pull it out of the oven, let it cool just slightly, and then slice it and put butter and honey on it, or have it with your stew or your soup. That's my favorite way to have it. You can't beat the smell of it cooking in your oven. You can make the sourdough bread with whole wheat flour, or you can make it with kamut or some of the other types of ancient grains if you like that. I have tried it those ways, but still my favorite is with the white organic flour. If you want it more natural, you'd use the kamut or the whole wheat. That gives it more nutrients. It depends on what you like and what your family likes. Making sourdough bread and things with sourdough starter are very popular right now. They have been popular for a long time, but especially since COVID. So you can find classes to attend. You can find lots of videos, like I said, on YouTube and on Instagram and social media. So make sure that you watch those and get the best recipe that works for you. And the bread is something that you can sell. You can teach classes, and so you can make some money from doing sourdough. I've seen it at lots of farmers markets and in neighborhoods, and I feel like it's something that I like to teach to other people because I feel like any kind of self-sufficiency skills that people can learn, including sourdough and gardening, makes me happy to know that people are able to take care of themselves and their families and have fresh, good food available to them. For many years before I started doing sourdough, my husband used to practically beg me to learn how to make sourdough. But in my mind, because of my experience with the Amish friendship bread, I thought, no, I don't want to do that. It's too much work to feed that all the time. But once I got started, once I practiced it and got better and better at it, I really, really enjoyed it. The idea of putting your hands into the dough and making something with your hands, it has been really fulfilling for me. And I've learned so much and have come such a long way with it that I absolutely love it. And I like teaching it to other people. So you'll find out, even if you've been discouraged before, to keep trying, and you'll find out that you actually love it. You can take a break from it for a while if you need to, but then bring it back because you'll find that you absolutely love it again, and you love the smell of it cooking, and it will make your neighbors and family and friends happy that you've gotten back into making sourdough bread. And if you want to take a break from just making the bread, there's always lots of other recipes that you can make using the sourdough starter. So give it a try. I hope that you'll enjoy making sourdough bread, and that you'll find as much joy in making it as I have, and learn how to do it and teach it to other people. Our next episode will be episode 9, and it'll be all about dehydrating food, and it'll be food that you can get from your garden, things like herbs and kale, also things like fruit leather, apples, even beef jerky. So dehydrating is a whole new thing that we learned while we've been on our little hobby farm, and something that we're excited to keep trying, and it's helped us a lot with feeding our family, and it's been really interesting to learn how to do it. And we're going to talk about that in our next podcast. So we hope that you'll join us for the next podcast, and please follow our show on Spotify. Like I said, it really helps us. Or on YouTube, Hobby Farm Dream, and on Instagram. We hope that you'll follow us and learn some more exciting things about how to be self-sufficient on your little farm or even in your kitchen, anywhere that you live. And we appreciate you listening and supporting us and our podcast. Thank you.